All right, what's up, everybody? Today is going to be about muscles in and around the lumbar region. Go back and watch the previous episode, which was about the lumbar discs, and then the episode before that was about the bony anatomy. Just kind of orient yourself to what we're talking about here in this one, and then next week will be about nerves, and then the fourth episode, as in the previous section, is going to be about self-treatment and exercise. So we use the term core quite a bit. What exactly are we talking about when we refer to the core? Consider these four muscle groups. You've got your pelvic floor on the bottom, and I'll put up images of all this stuff as I go through it. So you got your pelvic floor on the bottom, you've got your diaphragm on the top, and then there's a muscle called the transverse abdominis, and it wraps all the way around. Think of it like a corset. When it contracts, it's going to help build pressure through our core, through the core. And then on the back, there's a muscle called our multifidus. That is technically, it's an anti-rotator. Just think of it as a segmental stabilizer, and it goes all the way up and down our spine. A couple important things about the multifidus. We've got bigger, more superficial muscles, generally referred to as the erector spinae. It's a group of three muscles all the way up and down. Also, those are going to cross multiple segments. They're built more for moving us. The multifidus is deeper, it's closer to the joints, and it's only going to cross a segment or two, so that allows it to give us more of that deep stability. Something that happens with the multifidus, unfortunately, when we have not always a disc injury, but we'll run with that idea. If you injure the disc between L4 and L5, now you really need that multifidus to do its job and stabilize that segment, but it actually shuts off. And if that goes on long enough, like we're not able to reactivate the muscle, it can atrophy over time. So that can be kind of a cascade towards someone having a spinal fusion or something like that, which is, I don't wish that on anyone. And there are measures you can take. Now there is a treatment that's meant to reduce pain, and it does work for this reason. It's meant to reduce pain of the facet joints, and we'll take a quick look at the facets again. But go back to that first episode. It's called a medial branch block. So essentially, and the next step of that would be an ablation. So a medial branch block, they're just gonna kind of numb out the nerve endings so that they can't carry those pain signals from the facet joint. But the problem with that or an ablation is either of those things is going to affect the innervation of the multifidus and potentially lead that muscle to atrophy. So not always the best treatment plan. I understand why people do it, but definitely something to consider. But let's also take a closer look at the transverse abdominis. Like I said, it works kind of like a corset. It helps build pressure in through our trunk. If you look at the muscle fibers, they're in kind of a circumferential orientation, and that's what allows them to contract like this and build pressure. And that, to me, that's kind of our true core muscle, and it's critical that we know how to use that so that we don't take over for it with our rectus abdominis, which is like your six pack or your obliques or anything like that. Those muscles have their own roles. They can't provide that deep stabilization that the transverse abdominis is there for. And then I don't want to glaze over the diaphragm. Obviously, it's important. It helps us breathe, or the pelvic floor, but it's definitely part of the equation of core stability. Let's take a look at some other muscles in this region also, though. The psoas major, which is part of our hip flexor. Take a look at the image here, and you can see Yeah, it attaches here on the front of our femur so it can flex our hip. But look at where it originates from. It comes all the way up, even onto the T12 vertebrae, and it hooks onto all those lumbar segments um, as well. So, in a situation of anterior pelvic tilt where we've got weak abdominals, weak glutes, that hip flexor is potentially really going to tighten up, and just simply stretching it out is probably not going to get you the result that you want. You've got to consider all the other things that have gone into dysfunction um, in relation to that hip flexor being tight or overloaded or whatever it might be. Now there's a muscle called the quadratus lumborum, usually just referred to as the QL. But if you look at the image there, and I'll kind of spin it around, but the QL and the psoas kind of sit on one another, and the reason I point that out, they have different functions, but they can both kind of laterally flex us. And if one of them tightens up, it's a pretty safe bet that the other one is going to be tight as well. And you can see how things kind of start to um, snowball, or however you want to say it. One thing goes wrong and you start to compensate and develop tightness in other areas. Another muscle to consider, which moves our shoulders, but it hooks into all this fascia in our lower back, are the lats. So just take a look at the image here. So the lats are going to start up here where our pec and the biceps tendon runs right. Even for active people, lats can get restricted. Maybe we're not doing enough overhead stuff, or when we go overhead, we're getting too much spinal extension as a replacement for shoulder flexion. Meaning, if I'm trying to get here and that's as far as I can get, well, I can tilt back through my lumbar spine, which that's another problem. But the point I'm making here is that if we don't routinely get length applied to our lats, they can kind of fly under the radar and be a source of lower back pain. So again, this episode is just really meant to help you see what's going on in here. We're moving towards that fourth episode where we'll talk about what you can do about it. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I will see you guys soon for the episode about nerves in the lower